guys, let's kick off with what has been clearly the biggest story in Australia, probably the biggest story in the world over the last 6 to 8 weeks. And of course, I refer to the fires that have engulfed this beautiful country of ours. If we go to the front of the Financial Review, this is a story that I think will capture the imagination of the country tomorrow. States balk at PM's fire inquiry. That's the headline. And the first part says that the states are withholding support for Prime Minister Scott Morrison's Fire Royal Commission. And of course, that particular story, Caleb Bond, as I said, has dominated over the past few weeks, in fact, few months. And Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews has announced an independent review of the current bushfire season. The Morrison government says it's not surprised by the announcement, state-led reviews, and it won't deter any plans to proceed with a National Royal Commission.
Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews on the front foot, announcing the first fire review of this bushfire season.
We're going to see more and more of this sort of ferocious and unprecedented fire activity coming to us much, much earlier. This review will be a very important part of being ready for that as we look to the future.
The Premier has given Tony Pearce, Inspector General of Emergency Management Victoria, $2.5 million to conduct a review which will have two parts. First, the inquiry will examine Victoria's preparedness for this fire season, as well as the firefighting response.
That report will be with us and will be publicly available by the middle of this year, well ahead of the next fire season.
Second, the Inspector General will review the relief and recovery efforts as people return to their homes and rebuild their lives, with a report due by 2021. This announcement comes as Prime Minister Scott Morrison reportedly considers launching a federal royal commission into the bushfire season. Premier Daniel Andrews has brushed aside suggestions about the Royal Commission, insisting a standing review mechanism is the superior option.
It's unclear to me, again, I'm not making a criticism, I don't think it's been settled exactly what a federal inquiry will look at, but I have a commitment from the Prime Minister of further consultation and trying to work together as best we can on that.
It has always been our understanding that states would be undertaking their own reviews. I knew that in Victoria. It was something that Dan and I discussed the other day. In Victoria, there's actually a statutory requirement for one to be done in response to bushfires after Black Saturday. So that's understood. And the same will happen in New South Wales.
The Victorian government has also flagged a tourism package for operators in bushfire-affected regions and waiving the landfill levy for residents.
So anyone who has waste as a result of this bushfire, whether it's stock, it's fencing, it's your home, you will be able to access the landfill, to get rid of this waste without cost.
More than 1,500 firefighters continue to battle blazes across the state as the number of homes destroyed climbs to 353. Patrick Murrell, Sky News, Melbourne.
Caleb Bond, your thoughts?
I understand why the states would want to see what is actually going to happen as part of this national review, but I would think it's silly for them to not at least provide in-principle support. This has clearly been a damaging summer right across the country. We've had fires in South Australia, in Victoria, in Queensland, in New South Wales. You know, all over the country this is an issue, and I think that requires some kind of national response, or at least some kind of national investigation. Now, yes, the states can do their own thing because, of course, the states are ultimately responsible for the response to bushfires, and they have to work out how, in the future, they're going to allocate funds and how their emergency services are going to work. But I think it would be rash and silly of the states to push back against the federal government in this case, because I think the federal government and Scott Morrison simply want to help. They don't want to get in the way, and I think, you know, his response from the start was that he didn't want to get in the way. He kind of did in the end, but I think they want to make a genuine effort to make sure that across the country the states have all the resources and help they need, and they have every possible bit of information that they might require in order to make their responses easier. I don't see why that's a bad thing, and I don't see why every state and territory would not put its hand up and say, yes, let's have a national inquiry, let's talk about the terms and conditions of that inquiry, but we must do it, because it's not just each individual state that's been affected affected by these bushfires this summer. It has been the whole country, and that demands a national response.
Lisa, the Prime Minister has certainly come under flack for his handling of this crisis. What are your thoughts?
Look, I think at the moment now the focus is on him showing leadership. We've seen him take a hit in the polls, and look, the polls weren't terribly accurate at all when we were heading into the federal election, but it's certainly damaging him, and it's damaging what average Aussies are thinking about our Prime Minister. So he has to take leadership. I think Caleb's right. We need to see all of the states and territories behind the Prime Minister, and there should be a national look at exactly what worked, what went wrong, so we are prepared, should the bushfire crisis get worse again next year. But again, we should see each of the states hold their own inquiries and their own reviews, because they need to look at how they resourced the handling of the bushfires and what they need to do and what they need to put into preparation for next year and the coming years, because this isn't over.
And particularly vegetation management laws. I mean, that's been one of the areas that has come under a lot of attack in recent weeks and recent months.